Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. It is Tuesday, August 23rd, 5 p.m., and we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. This is our regular board meeting for August 23rd, 2022. Good afternoon. Great to see all of my board colleagues, Dr. Stubblefield, to all of our staff that are joining us in person and virtually, and to any community members that are joining us or anyone else joining us virtually as well. Welcome. We're glad to have you on. Just a quick note, we have been experiencing some technical difficulties today on the live stream of tonight's meeting. So if you're watching on YouTube or some other streaming, if there's a pause or a stop, I promise you we're working on it, and it should kick you back on as soon as we get that fixed. So just be patient. We apologize ahead of time for any technical difficulties that are being caused today. Again, good afternoon, and it's great to see all of you and great to be with you. So with that, I will read our board norms and protocols. We agree to respect differences of opinions in making decisions for the district, to follow the best practices in managing the superintendent and the management of the board itself, to stay on task when conducting business for the district, including while at board meetings, to never surprise the superintendent or each other when conducting official business of the district, to read these norms at the beginning of each board meeting and at board workshops as a reminder of how to conduct our meetings, and to continually self-check to determine if we're following our norms when conducting district business. So with that, Ms. Smith, would you please do a roll call?
Yolanda Clark.
Yolanda Clark, present.
Maxine Drew.
Maxine Drew, present.
Janie Humphries.
Janie Humphries, present.
Randy Lopez.
Randy Lopez, present.
Wanda Brownlee Page.
Wanda Brownlee Page, present.
Rachel Russell.
Rachel Russell, present.
Dr. Wynn.
Dr. Wynn, present.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. I would actually ask to amend today's agenda, and I would ask that we add 2 executive sessions at the end of the meeting under agenda item 9, executive session. The first one for the purpose of safety and security. The second one, it's on the agenda, but it should actually be for the purpose of discussing matters related to personnel, not safety and security measures. So if we could just make sure that that gets reworded correctly. So adding 2 executive sessions, 1 on safety and security and 1 on personnel.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion?
So will C and D still stand?
Yes, yeah. C and D will still be there. We'll just add those 2 executive sessions. Thank you. Any other questions? If not, Ms. Smith, roll call, please.
Yolanda Clark.
Yolanda Clark, yes.
Maxine Drew.
Maxine Drew, yes.
Janie Humphries.
Janie, yes.
Randy Lopez.
Randy, yes.
Wanda Brownlee Page.
Wanda Brownlee Page, yes.
Rachel Russell.
Rachel Russell, yes.
Thank you.
Dr. Wynn.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, Dr. Wynn.
Dr. Wynn, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Would now entertain a motion to approve the amendment.
Maxine Drew.
Maxine Drew, yes.
Janie Humphries.
Janie, yes.
Randy Lopez.
Randy, yes.
Wanda Brownlee Page.
Wanda Brownlee Page, yes.
Rachel Russell.
Rachel Russell, yes.
Dr. Wynn.
Motion carries. Thank you, board, for allowing us to do that. So we'll jump right into our agenda. The first item on the agenda is our consent agenda. Would entertain a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda?
So move.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Are there questions or discussion? Seeing and hearing none. Ms. Smith, roll call, please.
Yolanda Clark.
Yolanda Clark, yes.
Maxine Drew.
Maxine Drew, yes.
Janie Humphries.
Janie, yes.
Randy Lopez.
Randy Lopez, yes.
Wanda Brownlee Page.
Wanda Brownlee Page, yes.
Rachel Russell.
Rachel Russell, yes.
Dr. Wynn.
Dr. Wynn, yes.
Thank you.
Motion carries. Thank you so much. Our next agenda item 3, we will now hear from our superintendent of schools, Dr. Anna Stubblefield.
I better keep these on, can't read my paper. Good evening, everyone. I just have a few announcements or things to share. First, I want to share to please tune in tomorrow morning at 6:30 a.m. on KMBC TV 9 as they highlight the Sligo Stallion Band District All-Stars. They will be performing live on television as Johnny Rollins from News Chopper 9 welcomes back our students and staff. This is a part of the KMBC 9's Back to School Band Together, which they selected 5 schools in the metro area, and the Sligo Band was one of those. So congratulations to the Sligo Band. Next Tuesday and Wednesday, August 30th and 31st, the Unified Government will host the Tuskegee Airmen Mobile Museum exhibited in collaboration with KCKPS and USD 500. The mobile museum will be located at Sligo High School Stadium, located on Meadowlark Lane from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. to allow parents, families, and local residents the opportunity to view the Tuskegee Airman story. KCKPS, in conjunction with the Unified Government, are working to develop a youth aviation program for local students and possibly an air traffic controller program in collaboration with the local Red Tail Academy, Wheeler Airport, and John Hightower Jr. that will possibly launch next summer. Stay tuned for more information will be coming. This opportunity came up last minute, and we were reached out to ask if they can park on our property, and worked with staff to make it happen so that our families will have access to that rich piece of history. The annual Reasons to Believe program, sponsored by the Kansas City, Kansas Public Schools Foundation for Excellence, is happy to announce that nominations which honor alumni are now open. Every year, 12 alumni from KCKPS are selected based on their contributions to the community, their hard work, and accomplishments at large. Those selected for these prestigious honors are celebrated with a special ceremony in November. Please visit the foundation website for more detailed information. And the DePasquale Moore Law Firm Foundation, with the assistance of the Greater Kansas City Football Coaches Association, recently awarded grants for new equipment, uniforms, and other resources to local area high schools, volleyball and football programs throughout the Kansas City metro area. Our high schools were among the recipients of the new equipment valued at up to $6,000 for football and volleyball. These resources are provided by the law firm foundation. Some of the things that we received was tackle football equipment, field and practice equipment, end zone and sideline HD camera equipment, shoulder pads, helmets, pants, and other wearables, volleyball equipment, and footballs and more. And we want to thank the foundation for their continued support and generosity to our Boys and Girls program. And finally, I just want to say that safety, we had a great start to the school year last week, and safety is always our priority. We, as a district, will be as transparent as possible, but there are certain things that we cannot release to the public in order to protect the safety of our staff and students, and we appreciate all of the support from our community, our Kansas City, Kansas Police Department, and the KCK Police Department for their support as incidents arise. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stubblefield. Just a few comments, and I'll try to be as brief as possible. Again, just want to say welcome back to all of our teachers and students and families and staff as we open up another amazing school year. We're definitely looking forward to a great year with you. So just thank you to everybody that's helped to make sure that we've kicked off the year as best as we could. Thank you to all the parents and families for your patience and for just everything that you're doing to make sure that our students are going to have a successful school year. Board members, I understand many of you were able to visit schools and be out there to welcome students as they came back on their first day. So just thank you for all your commitment and everything that you do to be out there and represent our district as best as we can. So just thank you for your commitment and the work that you do. A couple weeks ago, or on the 13th, I was able to go out and participate on a panel discussion for an educational summit at the World War I Museum. It was a great panel discussion. Great conversation on diversity, on how we can help our workforce, how we can rethink what education looks like. And I'll share that there was a lot of conversation about social emotional wellness and well-being and trauma-informed practices, and we were able to share a lot of the successes that this school district in particular, we're in our third or fourth year of trauma-sensitive schools and trauma-informed schools. I know Brittany Talley and the team and Student Support Services are doing an amazing job of training and teaching our staff on what it means to be trauma-informed and working with our students. So just thank you for that work. And so we were a really shining example of a school district who's trying to do things well and look at the whole child and the whole adult, not just the child, right, but the whole person and how we deal with education academically and socially and emotionally. So it was a really great conversation, some amazing panelists. I believe there may be some video of it out there, but it was a great workshop, and so just kudos to everyone that participated. And I know we had some KCKPS representation there from our HR team and other departments who were able to be in attendance, so thank you for being there. And lastly, just again, board, make sure that you have September 7th on your calendar for our continued board development with KASB. Thank you to our board members for continued great discussion in our board development that we've had in the last couple of weeks. I think we are moving in a great direction to continue to do some good things and move our district along to be a top 10 school district as best as we can. So thank you to all of you for your time and commitment. So with that, I'll open it up if there are any other board members that would like to share anything. Okay, seeing none, thank you. Jumping to our next agenda item, number 4, we have no community comment today, but again, just a reminder to anybody that is watching, you are always welcome to share and participate in our board meetings via community comment. You can contact our board clerk, Ms. Leslie Smith, and she can help you get on the agenda to be able to give a community comment, whether it's written or to be here in person or via Zoom to give your comment. All right. So we will jump to item number 5, board updates and approvals. Board, these items have come before us previously, and these are up for action tonight if it is the will of the board. First up, it's recommended that the Kansas City, Kansas Board of Education approve the purchase of elementary reading intervention resources submitted by Matthew Anderson, Director of Multi-Tier Systems of Support, Darcy Swan, Executive Director of Curriculum and Instruction, Dr. Judith Campbell, Deputy Superintendent, and Dr. Anna Stubblefield, Superintendent of Schools.
So moved.
I second it.
Moved and seconded. Are there questions on this item? Seeing none, Ms. Smith, roll call, please.
Yolanda Clark,
Yolanda Clark, yes.
Maxine Drew,
Maxine Drew, yes.
Janie Humphries,
Janie, yes.
Randy Lopez,
Randy, yes.
Wanda Brownlee Page,
Wanda Brownlee Page, yes.
Rachel Russell,
Rachel Russell, yes.
Dr. Nguyen.
Dr. Nguyen, yes.
Thank you.
Motion carries. Thank you, Board. Next item, it is recommended that the Kansas City, Kansas Board of Education approve publication of the notice of hearing for the revenue neutral rate and the 2022-2023 budget and transfer from contingency reserve to LOB budget as submitted by Steve Lilly, Chief Operations Officer, Tracy Kaiser, Executive Director of Business and Finance, and as recommended by Dr. Anna Stubblefield, Superintendent of Schools.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, Ms. Smith, roll call, please.
Yolanda Clark,
Yolanda Clark, yes.
Maxine Drew,
Maxine Drew, yes.
Janie Humphries,
Janie Humphries, yes.
Randy Lopez,
Randy Lopez, yes.
Wanda Brownlee Page,
Wanda Brownlee Page, no.
Rachel Russell,
Rachel Russell, yes.
Dr. Nguyen.
Dr. Nguyen, no.
Thank you.
Motion carries. Thank you. We'll jump to our next agenda item under new business, item number 6. Board, these are coming before you for information purposes only. No action is necessary tonight or being asked of us tonight. But the first item, and I know that hopefully you all had a chance to review your email. There were some questions around some of these items, so there were some responses sent out to everybody, but again, if there are questions, that is what today is for. First item is our 2023 graduation dates. I'll pass it to Dr. Stubblefield if there's anything that we need to share on this prior to opening up.
I'll share, and Dr. Irving, in case there are questions, she'll come forward to answer them. One, I just wanted to thank the team for working to solidify the dates as early as possible so that we can share them with our families. We did explore trying to get Memorial Hall again, but unfortunately it was not available. However, Kansas City, Kansas Community College was. One of the questions that I know some may be wondering is why is it Friday, Sunday, not Saturday, Sunday? Saturday are regional track meets, so there are several of our students who participate in track and field, so those 2 dates were selected.
Thank you, Dr. Stubblefield. So we'll go ahead and open up if there are any questions regarding the graduation dates that are proposed or the information proposed. Yes, Ms. Page, I'm sorry.
I did send the question in, but I just want people to hear, because we often get criticized, and it's often said, well, did we consult the community?
So for the dates and time, we did not. We did, however, a few years ago, I know there was some concern when graduation was going to be held during the day, but because we were following traditional patterns of having it in the evening. We did get input from all of the high school principals who typically are getting feedback from their students and parents.
Additional questions? Okay. Seeing none, again, this is for information only tonight. No action is necessary, but if you do have additional questions or thoughts, please send those along to our leadership team, and we'll make sure to address those as promptly as we can. Thank you. The next item on our agenda, item 6B, is our Junior Achievement Curriculum Adoption, again, for information purposes only. I will open it up to see if there are any questions or discussion from the board. Okay, seeing none, again, likewise, if there are additional questions after today's meeting, please send those along to our leadership team, and we'll make sure to respond and get those out to the full board as they come in. Thank you. Our next item, Agenda 7A, we will hear from Dr. Zachary Conrad around our Kansas Assessment Program Report. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm with you guys tonight to share some information around the Kansas Assessment Program results, but really walk us through how this influences our decisions and how we are using this data to drive what we do at the district office and within our buildings. So first, we want to start off with how this all aligns. The state has accreditation, and that's within KCSA. We then align our district goals and priorities to KCSA and those outcomes to make sure that we are accredited. And then we take this down to the building level where it comes to MTSS, making sure that we have multiple tiers of support for each and every student. Buildings also have their improvement plans, also that we can ensure we meet our goal of all of our graduating students having a diploma plus. And so there's a number of ways that we do this and how we want to measure what we are doing. So we've seen this slide before. And so I'm going to go ahead and dive into what we do. So at the building levels, we expect all teachers to participate in these professional learning community level as well. We participate in professional learning communities. And here we are a professional learning community where we bring data to you guys, and we're able to have conversations and discussions about how to spend our resources effectively to support students. And there's 4 main questions that we answer in this in PLCs. What do we want all students to know and be able to do? How will we know if they've learned it? How will we respond when some students do not learn it? And then how will we extend the learning of students that who are already proficient? And so as we walk through the presentation tonight, we're going to touch on these 4 things. We're going to look at, just like teachers would in their classroom, we're going to model what that kind of looks like. And so we're going to walk through what we expect our students to know, and then how we know if they've learned it or not, and then what are we going to do to respond to that, either if they have or have not. And so first, what do we want students to be able to know? We've set these goals at a district level of wanting student achievement to be our primary focus. Everything else supports this. We want the strong academic foundation to be anchored by strong literacy skills. And we want rigorous standards and quality instruction. These are things that we've put out to the public that we want to achieve in this district. We have high expectations. So that's kind of what we want students to know and be able to do. We want them to be successful in this area. And so we have had the instructional focus for this school year specifically around some of our academics when it comes to ELA, because we want them anchored, as we said on the previous slide, by strong literacy skills. Now, we only truly have one outside measure of how our students are performing, and that's our state assessment. That outside measure that measures the standards. We really only have one, and it's our Kansas Assessment Program, a state assessment. We give this once a year. Often it's too late to really do anything, what we call autopsy data. And so what we're looking at here is how we're going to know whether or not our students have achieved that. Now this chart you'll see on here, this is the percent of our students across the entire district who were proficient, scoring in categories 3 and 4. And we have said we want this to be high achieving and rigorous, and our state assessment is definitely that. So this is the percent of students over the years, over the last 5 years, starting in 2017, that have scored proficient on the ELA state assessment. In 2017, we were about 14% of our students that scored proficient on the state assessment. Our highest year was 2019. We are currently about 13%. So last year, we were about 13%. Our math results are very similar, but for this presentation, we're going to walk through some of the things that we're doing focused on anchoring in these literacy skills. So we're about 13%. I would say that we're not meeting our goals looking at this external data. Now last year, I broke it down by grade level, and by year, we do have a couple highlights, some points to note, that we have had an increase in specific grade levels, like 3rd grade saw an increase, 7th grade saw an increase, but we also saw a decrease in 6th grade. And so you can look at where we were in the last 2 years. Now prior to this, we had COVID, right? We didn't take the state assessment in 2020, so I didn't put 3 years of data on here, but we do have the past 2 years. So we do have some room for growth, and that's what we're going to focus on. Of this data is telling us we should pivot. We need to do things a little differently. We'll get there. We also wanted to look at a quasi-external measure. This doesn't technically measure our standards the same way that a state assessment does, but we looked at FastBridge. And so this chart, we have our Kansas Assessment Level 3 cut score. It's 300, that score of 300. If you score above 300, you're deemed proficient on the state assessment. You can see that none of our grade levels, on average, are above that 300 mark, on average. We also have 2 cuts right here, around 490 and just shy of 520. These are FastBridge cut marks. And so on this one at 490, that is a 3rd grade low risk cut score. We could see that our 4th and 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, they all score above that. That is a very good thing.
Okay.
Right? On average, most of our 4th graders, 5th graders, 6th graders are scoring above that cut, that 3rd grade cut. Our 3rd graders are not on
Dr.
average
Connery,
scoring above it.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Just, I think we have a clarifying question or just a question,
yep,
if that's
go ahead.
okay. Okay.
So if you go back to the slide before this one, could one interpretation of this data, if I look back 2 years, could one interpretation of this data be 2 years ago, these 7th grade students would have been in 5th grade? The trajectory from that K to 5 has almost 5 times the increase in their K through 5 experience. Could that be an interpretation based on this data?
So on this particular slide,
Yes. So because these 3rd graders would have been in pre-K, these 4th graders would have been in 1st grade. If I'm looking backtracking,
yep,
would that correlation be possible in your opinion?
it could be. There's a lot of things that we'd have to explore there statistically.
Okay.
These aren't cohorts of the truest sense, and so there's students that come in and out. It's high mobility, so it's not the same set of kids.
Okay.
We'd have to really tease out that subset that is the same group of kids if we really wanted to make a statement like that.
Okay. And what would it take to make a statement like that? So could there be that something in the curriculum that we were doing K through 5, what would it take for us to get to the data that would say that curriculum and that information that we were providing has now in the 7th grade, I'm sorry, trying to think as I'm also, now in the 7th grade, their proficiency is 5 times as higher to those of their colleagues that are now in the 10th grade.
So we would need to have that true cohort, and it's just whittling down the students that have been with us the entire time. There's a lot of other variables that we're going to have to control for as well if we want to pinpoint the curriculum, but we're actually going to get to how we're going to evaluate the impact of curriculum and some of those things that we're
Okay,
going
so
to
I
do.
guess my last question, and we'll get to that, my previous question later. What would be the variables that would make these things so drastic like this?
The assessment itself,
Okay?
right, the rigor of that assessment. I mean, once we narrow down the students that are in that cohort, we'd be able to start to find similarities and really determine what variables are playing in there.
Okay.
Teachers, feeder patterns, home life. I mean, there's a lot of things that play into why a student performs the way the student does perform.
Okay. I guess yeah. Okay.
Sorry, and I do appreciate, just go ahead and pause me or whatever we need to do. Otherwise, I'm going to keep trucking through it.
Thank you.
Okay. And so what we see on this is that we have a 6th grade, going back to this chart, we have a 6th grade low-risk cut score. What we're seeing is that our students are not, our 7th and 8th grade students are scoring below the 6th grade cut score of low risk in FastBridge. So it's telling us similar data. We also see 3 colors here, a light blue, a dark blue, and an orange. And over here, there is a legend for that. So the light blue is elementary, the orange is high school, the dark blue is middle school. And again, here's the 3rd grade cut score. Each dot represents a student. We have way too many students that are orange. Those are our high school students that are below that 3rd grade cut of low risk. Even middle school students that are below that cut of low risk FastBridge. So again, we're seeing data here that we're not meeting our goals quite yet. And we need to be able to pivot and to do something different. So in a PLC where teachers come around the table and they have data in front of them, this is exactly what they are doing as well. They're looking at the data and they're saying, okay, something's not working here. We need to pivot. We also wanted to look at attendance data. And so we have the CAP assessment of 300 right here. And then we have different groups of attendance. And this is chronic absences. So 10 absences is chronically absent. And so this green box up here, we have proficient and present. The lower left hand, we have not proficient but present. And then we have this large pink box, let's call it pink, that is not proficient and not present. So for each of these groups, something is going on here where we can dive into and implement something such as attendance programs, and we can evaluate their effectiveness. So this large group of students we know we need to get in school. If they're not there, it's very difficult to learn the material. Okay? This group of blue right here, the lower left, something else needs to happen. They're there, but we need to support them differently, and so we need a different program there to support those students. And so this is how we're trying to get at the data of how we can implement things to help our students achieve by changing the systems that they're engaging in. Here's discipline, and we could see that there's a steady line going down, that the more incidences you have, the less likely you are to be proficient. It's just a correlation, it's not a causation, but at the same time, we know that a couple things are going on. If you're not in class, Well, it's hard to learn the material. If you are in class but you're not engaged, you tend to have behavior issues. And so here's another thing that we need to look at individual students to determine what can we implement to help these students be more successful in the system. And so we start to plan, and here's a quote from Nelson Mandela, that action without vision is only passing time. And I find that often in education, we can fall into this trap. We know something needs to be done, so let's do stuff. But without that grand vision, it's just passing time, and we move from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. Now, vision without action is merely daydreaming. Okay? Again, we can have these grand visions, but if nobody's doing it, well, boy, that was just daydreaming, right? But vision with action can change the world, and that's what we're looking to do, looking to change the world of these students. And so we have a couple initiatives. So again, if we go back to the PLC questions, what do we want them to learn? How do we know that they're learning it? And now, what are we going to do if they don't? So we have a bunch of ELA initiatives to help support it. And our department, DERA and TIS, is tasked with, I believe, these 4 things that we need to do. We need to make sure the data is available, that it's accurate, accessible, and actionable, so that we can fulfill this connecting of vision and action. Here's another quote that I like, which we'll follow up on the next slide. When performance is measured, performance improves. When performance is measured and reported, the rate of performance accelerates. So one of the things that we are implementing this year is student data dashboards. The reason for this is so that we can make sure the data is available so that we can use the data. 5 Labs is going to be a useful tool for our departments as we meet with principals one-on-one. We want to have these monthly meetings one-on-one where we can review their building goals, how they align to the district goals and KCKPS, and we'll have conversations and go in and talk about their plans and how they're progressing and how we can better support them. So we'll have these one-on-one conversations so that we can accelerate performance. Now, we plan to evaluate this by ensuring that we have those meetings and looking at the outcomes from these meetings. Our goal is actually seeing improvement. And if they're not, then we need to rethink the hypothesis that just by putting data in front of you and holding you accountable and talking about these things, if that's not working, let's shift it, let's pivot. But this is our hypothesis, and we're going to proceed with that. We also would like to get information about standards before the state assessment. So right now we have one external measure, the state assessment. We want to implement district common assessments that are standards aligned, that have the rigor of a state assessment, but come in a more timely manner where we can actually see some improvement. As you can see here, 4th grade Timmy scored a 284 on the ELA CAP. I'll get that out. Timmy's fictitious, 284 is not, right? Lots of our students scored 284, but that's where it stops. The information stops for teachers. It's not as useful, and we got to provide better standards-aligned feedback to teachers. Teachers ask these questions when they receive those scores. And unfortunately, these scores don't actually answer these questions. We need to build an assessment specifically for this so that when teachers ask these questions around a PLC, they can have the answers to them. And so we want to be able to provide district common assessments for this purpose. Do we have a question or comment?
Oh, yes, we do. So you talked about teachers. The next step that I'm going to talk about is parents or guardians or caregivers. Oftentimes, parents are provided, this is what your kid scored on this test. How does what 5
Lab?
Yes.
Yeah, student analytics.
What you've created also translate to parents, because I think no one is aware until, or oftentimes parents aren't aware until their kid is doing something for the first time and they're like, you don't know what that is? And it's like, no, I don't. what responsibility does DARA or TIS have in ensuring that parents do know how to be a partner in this work outside of just the classroom teacher?
Yeah, I think that's an important collaboration that we have with teachers to make sure that the tools are there, that they can connect with parents. Throughout this entire process, you gotta connect with parents, guardians, so that they are partners with us in helping students succeed.
So I'll look forward to the tool that helps with that, because I think in the background of this district common assessments, we see what is oftentimes provided to parents. That means nothing to me as a parent. I need more context. How does, whether it's the standards conversation or it's this is what it looks like for your child comprehension. So thank you.
Absolutely, and I think it's really important that if we tie district common assessments to the scope and sequence, that conversation is very fluid. Here's what we're planning on learning first quarter. Here's how we're going to measure it at the end of first quarter. Here's the resources we're using. Here's how you can support your student. All those conversations, we play a role in helping connect those dots with parents and guardians in our community. And so there's a couple ways that we plan on evaluating our district common assessments to making sure that they're having the impact that we want them to have. We'll be looking at the rigor of the items, because that's one thing that we need. We'll also be looking at how the data gets used in PLCs. And when I talk about evaluations of these programs, these are things that we want to bring back to you as well. We want to be able to share with you what we're doing, if it's working, if it's not working, how we're going to pivot, just like a PLC, right? And so anticipate the evaluations of these programs. And so I'm kind of mapping out how we intend to evaluate them. If you have other things that you want us to include in the evaluation or look at, such as communication. How does communication work and fit in with that? We can definitely look at that. But this is how we plan on evaluating whether or not district common assessments are serving their purpose. We also, we've talked about the new CKLA curriculum. You guys know about this, and so I didn't put a whole lot of information in here except for how we plan to evaluate CKLA curriculum. And so we want to look at how it's being implemented, whether it's being implemented with fidelity, and so we have some tools for that. DigiCoach is going to be one of those tools where we walk classrooms. And from that, we'll be able to see multiple groups, we anticipate. Those that are implementing it with a high degree of fidelity, those that maybe aren't as high fidelity. And we'll be able to watch the results there of those two different groups and analyze whether or not it's having an impact. We'll also look at the outcomes of CAP and FastBridge throughout the way to know, okay, here's the classroom that's implementing it well. How are scores moving over time compared to a group that's not implementing it as well or with as much fidelity? And so we'll be watching that closely. And then supplemental instruction, tutoring. That was one thing that was approved this evening on consent agenda. Again, we want to look at fidelity with it. We're going to closely monitor attendance so that we know that we have our groups correct. We want to look at, so it's the dosage is the same as we compare them. We should see more dosage, increase in scores. That's our hypothesis. And so we'll be monitoring that as well. They have some assessments built in. We'll look at pre-post test, FastBridge data, CAP data. We got a small taste of this last year, but last year we implemented it kind of late in the year. We couldn't find solid groups there of consistency for attendance or dosage. And so it was a little wonky looking at some of the results, but I think we have a very solid plan and we know how to tighten it up for this school year so that we can monitor how that is working. And then summer learning. I've heard it's been asked about summer learning results, and we want to bring these to you in October. The main reason for this is because we have a 3-part evaluation. We want something that's a little bit more sensitive. So during summer learning, pre-post test, that's going to be the most sensitive measure because we're actually teaching those standards and seeing growth. Then we wanted to do fast bridge, their spring results to the end of summer results. That's going to be less sensitive of a measure because it's kind of higher level. It's not specific to what was being taught. We wanted to see if there was any movement there, and we have control groups for that, so we could see that. But really, I think fast bridge is going to be a better measure when you look at spring to fall results to see if there was any gains over the summer compared to similar students that didn't do summer school. And so we needed to wait until we take the fall, and the window's actually open right now, fall fast bridge, so that we can then analyze the data and bring that back, because we think that'll be a little bit more kind of responsive of long-term learning if we did actually have an impact there. So that's why we paused for a second on just bringing that report back, because we did want to get that piece of data. And so those are some of the things that we're going to implement this year. That's some of how we're going to evaluate it. So throughout this year, we'll be looking at the evaluations on whether we need to pivot, what's working, what's not working. And this is how the PLC functions in schools and at the district level when we have conversations. So that concludes what I had to present. Are there any additional questions?
Thank you, Dr. Conrad. We'll go ahead and open up for questions. Ms. Clark?
I have a few questions. Thank you, Dr. Conrad, for that information. So in one of your slides, and I thought I wrote down the slide number, you talked about students that were present. And I'm just curious about the definition, and I don't want to take us too far, but I am curious about the definition of present. Present for a day, present for a class. What's just the general definition of that?
Yeah, it is a day.
Okay.
And so when you have chronically absent, you have 10 absences.
But what's the feedback look like there and the accountability factor that takes place? Because I am a firm believer in conversations and feedback, but I'm also a firm believer in action. And so what's it look like when you have a school that's not performing, not necessarily saying it's the principal's fault, but maybe we need to look at like what's really happening in the school, who has the authority, the rights to have those types
Those goals, and we'll talk through the data, and I'll make sure that it's there and available. So I'll do everything on my part that we can to support the building administrator. Now, from there,
And so as part of the team working together, each one of the principals reports to a different executive director, so they will be a part of those conversations. They have more frequent contact with those principals, so once they have the data, that's what they will focus on as they're doing their coaching conversations, their conversation around how they're progressing towards the goals. But those are the ones who are their direct supervisors that will be more responsible for the accountability part, to make sure that whatever is coming up, if they have the right supports in place and that kind of thing. And in long term, this information will better inform the building needs assessments as we look at those annually, because they will have the data to talk about, like, so for example, if you have 2 interventionists and somebody else doesn't, are we really getting that information? Like, it'll all work together when you start to evaluate the data and what they have and don't have, or the progress that we're seeing with the different student bodies.
Okay.
So when he's meeting with the building principals, is the executive director not at that meeting? So are
No,
they
they are.
also?
They are.
Make sure the data is clean, make sure it's accurate, so that they understand how to disaggregate it and determine the next steps, while we have our executive directors and myself and the curriculum instruction team to say, now that we have these are the steps that we need to take to make a change and a shift, and then continuing to monitor that over time. So it's not in isolation. I think that was your.
Yeah, that was definitely my question, because I think we have a lot of good processes in place, but I just wanted to make sure that all of it was working together. My last question is around DigiCoach. I know we approved that a little while ago, and so I heard it and I saw it listed there. I just, at a super high level, like helping me connect the dots with what that will do in comparison to the data and like how it all comes together. Because I understand it was a big help to the district and a big help with being able to monitor. So monitor students, staff, I just don't remember which one.
So it's the
Okay.
students, but also there are varied rubrics that we're looking at. So when we're looking at, and I'm going to just yield to Dr. Conrad, looking at the academic piece, because we can also look at, we can utilize that tool, but we're really drilling down on using that as a walkthrough tool to give direct feedback at the current on academics. Are we using the curriculum with fidelity? Are students engaged? Are we assessing? Are we aligning what we're teaching to the standard?
And hearing this, we recognize that we've gone through some unfavorable times, dealing with COVID and everything, and our student numbers are down. But I like the fact that you have begun to put the potential for excellence and growth with consistency in the plan as to how we're going to move forward. By looking at this data, it gives us a foundation in which we can start more like a check and balance system to look at as we move forward. And I'm looking forward to be able to seeing the growth as it comes through, because we have to know where we start but in order for us to be able to get where we're going to go. So again, I just wanted personally to say thank you for presenting this information, and I'm looking forward to hearing quite a bit. I like the fact that you're going to include meeting with the principals and getting feedback within the schools as a part of that check and balance system, make sure that it does work itself out. Thank you.
I appreciate that. I'm excited for that as well. Thanks.
Dr. Nguyen.
Thank you. So I have two questions, please. Back to the communication idea. What's the plan, since we have so many non-English speaking parents? How are you communicating the data to the parents?
So right now we have a couple tools, and I'll defer this to the communications department and to our ESOL directly to parents using Bright Chat. And the app, whatever is selected on your phone, whatever language is selected on your phone, Bright Chat does translate into that language and then back again. And so we do have some of those tools speaking specifically to parents who speak other languages.
Okay. And you do have this data by schools. I know you do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the assessment data?
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is my question to you, Dr. Stubblefield. What's the date of when we will return, the board will return to that requirement of looking now that we have the CAP scores and allocating resources, time for the students to reach level 3?
So the board has already seen the building needing assessments that the principals completed for this budget year. One of the things that, as we've talked with KSDE, and the state knows that it is lagging data because so we'll come back, all of that will come back to you on September 13th, but the buildings are just getting this data. So what they use to inform their building needs assessments for this upcoming school year was the data from the previous year.
That's correct. So the question is, when will the board meet again?
But to the board, if they want to have an additional discussion, the board did have the discussion based off the data that they had, and we did talk about what the principals, we went through every building
Correct.
needed.
I was at that meeting.
Yeah.
I understand we had a conversation about what the principals checked. That did not satisfy, I don't know what KSD is telling you, but that did not satisfy what the law requires us to discuss. I mean, I'd like to know then, where is the document that we said we've allocated certain
Oh, I'll send that
resources?
to you all this Friday. If you're going to have another meeting and a discussion around it, it's on the September 13th agenda. If you want to have a larger meeting, that's collectively up to the board. I pulled all of you all's information together. We're finalizing it, and I'll send that out to you this Friday. And then you can make a determination if it's compiled based off everybody's responses around that, and it shows what everybody shared around those 3 questions.
Okay, thank you. That's the only thing I asked you, the
Okay,
date, so
yes.
September 13th.
I was misunderstanding.
So I was going to clarify, because that was also my question based on her feedback. So if I'm understanding, will you need final approval at the September 13th meeting for
So-
what we as a board are collectively saying?
So what I will say, based off you all's responses, a lot of them were the same, and we just included everything. So once you see that, the board can then make a decision, because you can present it all in totality, like if everything was checked and anything anyone added, it can be that list in its entirety, or it can be, here are the three things, like that. But if they were identified as barriers, if you look at our different schools, in some cases, they like, all of these things are barriers, plus this. There was no limit for what it is, but it's just, you just have to answer it. So once I send it back to you, you all will need to make that determination if this suffices, or if we want to narrow it down and make it more concise.
But we don't currently have a meeting between Friday and September 13th.
There is a board development meeting on September 7th. You could add time in that meeting to discuss it if you chose to do that, yes.
My preference would be that if there is a discussion that needs to be had about that it does not take place during that time, to stay true to what that we don't have data, the data is misconstrued, the data is all over the place. Could you restate your comment around why
Yeah.
we don't have data for something, and I'm just gonna be honest, that we're spending a lot of money on, and what the next steps to that, because we have also tonight approved additional dollars, but we don't have data to inform the decision around that approval. And while I support tutoring, I just getting my little spill out, I also don't want to be spending lots of money on things that we have no idea that they're actually working for our students.
I'm with you. That's fantastic. So when we do a statistical analysis to know if it's working or not, we're looking for significance. And so as we run that, we want to find a control and experiment group, or we want to be able to at least control the variables enough to say it's working or it's not working. So that we can bring to you guys, okay, here's the results, right? Unfortunately, when we go looking for those groups, we can't find enough of those groups to be able to do a strong comparison there, because the data we implemented late in the school year last year, and
How there could be issues in that data. So the board implemented for athletes that were falling below the line, implemented these student plans. However, every student has a student plan, I got that. But for these particular athletes at these high schools that were participating in KCKPS activities, they were going to this tutoring, or so it was told. We would see a difference in those particular students if they were going to these lessons every other said day. Why would that not be a control group that would be eligible? And if
Yeah.
you need to come back, that's fine.
No.
I'm struggling there.
I'll give you one example. Okay, as we pull the data, looking at attendance or dosage, right? We want to make sure that you've had enough tutoring. And then, so that wasn't tracked.
You should have, because you was playing.
It wasn't tracked as tightly because you have to build schedules for it, and we have to know. So we have to know, did the student actually make it to that tutoring session? Did we take attendance for that? Whereas in a school, it's a lot easier, or I mean, it's normal, right, to be able to say, okay, this time is dedicated towards that, but we don't actually build it into the schedule. Sometimes they switched out tutors in that program, so there's another variable in there that I can't control for. And so if I came back and said there's no effect, there could have been. So now I'm getting a false negative, when really there isn't an impact, but I'm bringing you bad data because I can't know for sure, if the same tutor did it throughout the whole time and the student was present the whole time, I bet you'll see some impact.
Okay.
But if I don't know if it's the same tutor, then I'm calling it a false negative, right? I'm saying, oh, there's no effect. actually there is an effect, I just can't capture it. And that's what I'm saying, if we set it up in a certain way that we can control for those variables, the statistical analysis becomes a lot cleaner so that we can actually bring back results to you and say, with confidence, right, this does impact it at this rate, and you spend X amount of dollars, and there's your return on investment, right? And that's what we truly want to get to. I don't want to.
And we have addressed those variables that.
Yeah, and typically, I mean, just like car manufacturing, right? You don't buy the first year model for a reason. And so this was us getting something off the ground that was new to us too. And so it did allow us to work out some of those kinks, and we've gone back to the team analysis to actually bring to you and say, do this or that. I just don't have
And
that.
then I just want to clarify, we did report on those students who did participate in tutoring, and we showed that in, I think, the June report, like the GPA or that. But what we shared was based off of the things that we had in place, and he's talking more about statistical analysis and really looking at it to see if there was impact. We did have more students with that current implementation who stayed eligible, who grades improved in that, and we shared that data, I think, in June.
Yeah, and I remember that data, but that's GPA centered. That's not actually
And-
being
and-
able to.
Right.
To show up on the CAP test that you've improved.
Right.
GPA and a teacher giving me an A versus my actual intellectual knowledge of, do I actually understand what I got, or did I pass the test? Those are two different things, and
Yeah.
I think.
Right, and I agree with you, but we didn't have the systems in place to be able to talk about what he's, and those are the systems we are putting in place so we can really evaluate our return on investment and pivot as necessary.
I apologize for not knowing that some data did get reported in June. That was
Oh, you
slightly
fine,
before
you
my
fine.
time.
You did a great job.
Sorry.
You answered the question I was getting at.
Yeah.
Which, yeah. Thank you.
This may not be current, but something you can tell them where they are and what they need to do and how they can help their child and what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
I mean, to make the meetings more effective, you would hope that you're sharing, you're giving something in each 9 weeks. We should be able to say, we see some growth, we see this, so they can have something and can, like these, some of these little charts, can they be set up where parents can see and understand it better?
So I'll answer the first part, and then you can talk about the charts. The family advocacy meetings we had last week really were to connect with families, to hear about their experience from the summer, to talk about what the school year would look like, and to start to build those positive relationships. There is another family advocacy in September, and then I think the ones after that will be more focused on what you're talking about, but those initial ones was to really build a foundation and make the families feel welcome, connected, and to hear about what their goals and hopes and dreams for their students are for this school year, and then to talk about what was planned. So they didn't drill down into like, this was your student's CAP assessment, or this is where they did on the Fast Bridge. For the most part, it was really building those initial foundational so that they will feel.
Will this, or something of this, just a caption of what was said, will that go on our Facebook page? Does it go in the paper? Because people need to know.
So this meeting is recorded. We will have a data dashboard on our websites. We're building that out so that it is more live data. So that information all is public.
But besides the dashboard, are we using any other medium to get the word out to people?
It's on our website, it's in
Okay,
board
but what
docs.
if I don't have access to a website and I want to know? How will they know?
So I think my understanding, and Edie's if I'm misspeaking, if families don't have access to technology, all of our students have access to it, so they can use that. But as we build out the Welcome Center, we will do that. They also will have curriculum nights. And if families don't have access to it, the schools work with them to give them, like if they need something printed out or those kind of things. Those things happen based off the individual needs of
But
the family.
what if I'm in the community, I'm concerned?
They can contact our curriculum
Don't we
department.
send out anything?
We
Print
send out
anything?
so Edwin's department sends out, I think, is it monthly, Edwin? To the community, but I was addressing if they don't have access to technology, if they let,
Be able to communicate with everybody. So what other mediums are we using?
we don't send out mailers, unless I'm wrong, there's a cost to that. Like, we don't send out stuff we send stuff to our families in the mail if they say it, but we don't just send out community mailers, to my knowledge. But Edwin is there and can. let you
Yes,
know.
so we have various platforms. We have our social media, which is short messages through links. We have our Education Connection, which we mail to over 50,000 households. That's our mailer, the website. And we also have our electronic newsletter that goes to various groups within the community, even staff members.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Conrad. Thank you,
Oh.
Edwin.
And our TV channel.
Thank you, Edwin. Thank you, Dr. Conrad, for the information. If there are additional follow-up questions, please make sure we send those out to leadership, and we'll get them addressed as well. And we'll look forward to some of the additional data presented later in the year. Thank you. So we'll continue on with our agenda. We'll jump into agenda item number 8.
IHF is your graduation policy, and there were a couple things with this that needed to get addressed. One is that when you guys, the last policy change you guys made to IHF, or to the graduation requirements, you did back, I think it was in 2017, but at that time you had a motion enacted by the board that adopted some additional requirements for graduation. However, we did not actually change the graduation policy at that time. We just changed the graduation requirements. And then when we had the COVID pandemic over the last several years, you guys did a temporary adjustment to the policy to modify the graduation requirements. So now we're back to where we need to formalize the policy change to bring the board policy into alignment with what the recommended graduation requirements are moving forward. And so the change that you have proposed in front of you from administration addresses a couple different things. One, it would just have a standardized graduation requirement that would not include any additional certifications or not include the foreign language requirement. And then you have some additional diplomas that would show or reflect.
There's a motion and a second to approve first read for policy IHF. Are there questions or discussion from the board? Seeing none. Ms. Smith, roll call, please.
Yolanda Clark,
Yolanda Clark, yes.
Maxine Drew,
Maxine Drew, yes.
Janie Humphries,
Janie, yes.
Randy Lopez,
Randy Lopez, yes.
Wanda Brownlee Page,
Wanda Brownlee Page, yes.
Rachel Russell,
Rachel Russell, no.
Dr. Nguyen.
Dr. Nguyen, yes.
Thank you.
Motion carries. Thank you. Next item is is recommended to accept for second read changes to policy JGG. Mr. Goheen.
So policy JGG is in front of you. This is the transportation policy that has, as a proposed modification, the changes that are up there, we still have the major issue that the board needs to decide and give direction on, and that is to what degree do you want to open up or change, if at all, allowing students to transport themselves, and if so, under what conditions or circumstances do you want to do that? That's the issue that's really in front of the board. Policy's back up there for a second read, but at the end of the day, I need some direction from the board as a whole as to what you guys want into place. But again, didn't want to take the time to do that until we had some direction from the board as a whole as to whether that's something the board wants to do.
And there were a couple of questions around, did Infinite Campus have the capacity to do an electronic signature? And we did verify that that is accurate. And we also, that is possible, I mean. And then we also was able to learn that there was a question about could driver's license and insurance or whether documents could be uploaded. It can be through Infinite Campus when it's open for like registration or enrollment. But if someone happens to miss that date, then either they could take it to their school and the school can upload it for them, or there's another technology that we can use. So that part, if the board decided to do it, our student information system does have the capacity to house all of that information so that anyone that had access to that student information could see that they had that permission or not. So I just wanted to report on that because I did not share it out prior to now.
Can we ask the question?
Absolutely, yes, Ms. Page.
Mr. Gohan,
Yes.
if a parent signed off and said that are we liable still in any way?
Event rather than have the district transportation. And they signed a release and said, I understand the district is providing that transportation. I understand that the district has insurance to cover that district-provided transportation, but whatever reason, I would prefer to pick my son or daughter up and take them to that event and return them. And they sign that, then we're not going to have liability for that situation in that context. It gets a little bit different, perhaps, if you have just a student being signed off to drive or transport themselves. You could have the same release by the parent authorizing the student to drive him or herself to the event, but you do still have some places where there could be some liability or exposure. So, for example, if the district sees the student driving recklessly into the parking lot and then allows them to continue on, or if you have some other situations where you're aware of the student is under the influence of something and you allow them to get in their car and drive to the event based upon that release, that's not going to get the district off of liability. So you do have some concerns there. We can draft as good a release as we possibly can, but that doesn't mean if something happens that somebody won't file a claim.
Put parameters around. So from the district's perspective, that's what I would think, that we would put some guidelines behind how far, or is it just to district property if they're playing a game from one school to another versus I'll meet you in Topeka.
So how far, any other parameters that you're thinking about? I mean, this is kind of the discussion that the
Yep.
board needs to have, and so we have some idea of what you might want into the policy. And again, I know you're just one board member, but the whole
Right.
board needs to weigh in on this.
Yeah, so, I mean, from just my voice, I would say maybe I don't know if we're talking the Wyandotte County area. I don't know if we're talking within 30 miles or 20 miles. So that's probably what the board, if we decide to go this direction, you're right, the board, along with your guidance, would need to make that decision. But I am an advocate for the students to be able to drive. I think our families need that. And I know I talked about this last time. There's some, I mean, we have students walking. And sometimes practices are ending at 6 and 7 o'clock at night. Depends on the time of the year. It's getting dark during that time. And so there's some things to be considered there too, if we have them walking with no sidewalks.
I have a question. In the policy, and there's a, where the parent or
So you're thinking a restriction on how soon before the event the district would have to
Exactly.
receive the signature? Okay.
is that something that we, as a board, is that something we need to consider?
The document is not an actual policy document, but the document that they utilize when they go on field trips, where while the school is providing the transportation, the parent, am still signing off that I know my child is going here, and I know that they're taking the school bus. Could we use a form similar to that to identify those events? I guess if it's over a semester, maybe it would be like for the fall of something. They're able to transport themselves to get to and from this athletic activity, or for the entire year. I don't know. I'm thinking of the form and trying to remember the language, but I wonder if that form that that parents use to provide written permission for school buses.
I think we want to be
So-
somewhat careful about having too many options. on
Yeah,
the
so
form.
I was just going to share, in other districts that allow this, you typically, when you're doing your registration or enrollment, check off the whatever the scenarios may be, they can drive themselves.
Duration, is it something that we need to add to it? I'm not suggesting we put it there.
Right.
But is it something that we would like to consider? If we don't, I'm okay with that.
Okay. That's where I was too. If that's what the board wants, I can go that direction. I do think the length is a conversation. I don't know that I feel comfortable saying you, the student, are driving all the way to Wichita to participate in this debate tournament. I think that is, and I just use Wichita because that seems far. That may not be far, but.
And I picked on Topeka. I felt like that seemed far. So an hour versus 3
Topeka, I
hours.
was like,
Other thoughts? Dr. Nguyen, yes.
So, Mr. Goheen, are there any conditions that this authorization would be revoked, voided?
So the parent could always revoke or void the release. So, just like any other document a parent signs, they can always sign a second document saying, I revoke the permission that I've given for the district to release my son or daughter to drive to an event. So that would always be in play as long as they came up and did that. You may want, some districts would do this, is that the student's got to be.
My one concern is that if we do allow them to drive, are we going to ensure that we still provide district transportation for our children who do not have other transportation options? I don't want to fall into it where you can only go to this if you can drive yourself.
I think that's, again, the board decision based upon what you provide or don't provide. And again, you get into a cost issue that may come into play. If everybody's driving to an event, are you still providing a bus that's going back and forth that nobody's on? However, the flip side of that is you do get into an equity issue of some students may not be able to participate if they don't have transportation provided with the district. And so I think that is an important consideration.
And then the other thing is, we need to think, are we going to allow them to transport siblings? If I remember right, isn't it a restricted license under the age of 18 where you can only transport yourself or your siblings in your vehicle?
The restrictive license is
From
seniors.
It's tiered, I know that. I don't know.
It is tiered. There is a license that you can get at the age of 17 there is no restriction, so. We know that because I just lived that life.
Right.
with children over the past 40 years, there's just a little bit less thought sometimes.
that is also with adults. So that's where I come from with that.
I think we talked in our last board meeting, though, around students not transporting other students. If I remember correctly, no matter who the student is, they were not able to transport other students. So someone correct me if I'm wrong, and I think that also could really be a liability issue, so.
That's how it's currently drafted.
Yeah.
Again, if the board
Well,
wants
I think we
to depart
talked
from
about
that,
leaving
the
it that
board would
way.
have to say that you want to depart from that, so we can put some language into that effect.
I do also have the same concerns as Ms. Humphreys on if you have a group of 5 and maybe they always attend these certain events and they're able to drive to those certain events, like what's the logistics behind, I took my kids' keys and now they need a ride and we're like, we don't have a ride, we've been doing this for 6 weeks and you never needed a ride, so we don't have transportation provided. So probably need to just think those things out as well. Like what does that look like? Because we won't have a bus standing by for those types of events.
So I will say, if the board decides to do this, typically if it's an event that there are multiple students attending, we do provide transportation, and I don't imagine that would go away, but it would depend on the circumstances, because some of this came up because if there were individuals who needed to go to KU at 10 a.m. and there were no buses available, they could drive themselves to do the internship.
Okay.
That's very different than I just want to drive myself to the basketball game, because we would always provide a bus for like a basketball team or that kind of thing. So I think if the board decides to do it, those nuances where we currently standardly provide transportation, there would not be any reason that we would not have transportation available, because I think most students will still need to access the transportation.
And I don't see Ms. Romstad here. Is it possible, Greg, that we omit the athletic part of it? Because I think, I also don't, and I
You certainly
didn't see
could.
her, I know that we talked about practice being one of the solutions for why people could drive, but we also talked about what are other things we could do. The nature of me bringing this forward was for educational, curriculum-based experiences, not necessarily, we're going to a basketball game in Blue Valley, I want to drive myself so I can leave right after the game is over. Because I also think there's a camaraderie in athletes riding together, but I'm not an athlete, past whatever life. Does that make it complicated, or does that provide direction without also 50 parents saying, well, Tammy, your board said my student can drive themselves to any school activity?
It would, in terms of limitations on what degree of allowance for students to drive themselves, that could be policy-driven. So if you say it's for the internships only, that could be something that could be policy. If you say it's for all extracurricular activities, that could be something that's policy-driven. From an administration standpoint, it may be more difficult to police because you may have to make distinctions about, well, what's considered curriculum and what's considered non-curriculum. So our extracurricular activities that are governed by KCKPS that aren't sports, are those considered curriculum or non-curriculum, for an example? But again, it is just a matter of what degree of limitation, if any, does the board want to put on it? And then policy can be crafted from that, or if it's something that goes to more of an administrative guideline or what the form looks like, that could also be an aspect of that as well. For the policy level decisions that need to be made are things like if it's going to be limited in terms of geographic scope or time scope or other students being present in the vehicle or athletic versus non-athletic things. If those are things that matter to the board in terms of putting this into place, then we need to know that so that we can put language in the policy that covers it. So I've got some
So-
ideas from individual board members, but I kind of need to know.
Do we need a motion? Like geographic, do you want a number? So no more than 50 miles, 50-mile radius?
Yeah, I mean,
I am 100% behind no other students in I think that was the consensus.
let me ask this question. Is there any board member that wants the student to be able to drive another student to an event? Well, I think that's just a non-starter, so that's just not part of the policy. That one becomes an easy one, right? If the board goes this direction and decides to allow students to transport themselves to other events, are the board members in favor of a mileage limitation on that or a distance limitation on that? And I know some board members are just outright opposed to having this be the case, but does everybody not want the kids to be able to drive themselves to Wichita, for example? That was one of the examples that I heard.
I would say no on Wichita and no on Topeka.
So maybe local.
That would be my thought as well, is local.
Local meaning Wyandotte County, or local meaning the metro area?
And that's where I don't know enough about where our students are going. So that's what I don't know if this is solving for 10% of the issue now, or if we put that type of limitation on it, is it solving for 90%? That's what I don't know.
I can, based off of what I've seen that was available, it's no more than 30 miles away. I think the furthest is Olathe Medical that I've ever seen come as an opportunity for my student. And that's just me speaking, but I don't know, that's one area that has these opportunities.
I can speak for baseball. I think we've done it as far as Olathe as well. Anything else? Yeah.
Okay. What about any other, the other thing I heard mentioned that would be a demarcation is athletic versus, or I guess maybe academic versus non-academic events. Would that be a better way to phrase it?
Yes, the athletic people may dislike me because academics and athletic, that conversation around how athletic items encourage better academics, I recognize that. I just also want to not just open a complete. That's my perception.
What are the
I
other
will-
board members saying?
I will say other districts, common practice is athletic teams do ride together. I think the caveat that we have here is that the practice component. I don't think it's the competition, because if it's two kids who are bowling or a team, typically there's transportation. I think where it came up was our kids are walking to practice, which is different from the athletic component. But I don't know how you all want to
Did we
address that.
get the information around how many of our teams are actually, like, how big of the pool we're talking about and how we could potentially address those internally versus, and go ahead, Ms. Clark, sorry.
No, I don't have that answer, but you're right, that is. And I also want to make sure, because when Dr. Stubblefield was speaking, it made me think, I also want to make sure our coaches they understand that this, what I'm not trying to add is tension. So if it's the practice that's a valid point, that our teams, we ride together, we roll together, we cheer together, we come back home together. I don't want this policy to remove that. I wanted to remove the heartburn of families when they can't get their students to certain places. I want to remove the heartburn of students walking when it's not necessarily the right thing for them to do. That's what, and I'm speaking for me, but I'm seeing some head nods. I think that's what we're trying to solve for here. So I definitely don't want to remove what it means to be a team from our students, because that also builds a lot of character.
Can we check to see? Because I know at Harmon, I didn't know those girls were walking so far to a soccer field, and then it's going to start to get dark pretty soon. And then Dr. Faust got a bus for them, so they wouldn't have to walk so far. So can we check on that to see if there are any situations like that?
Dr. Irvin is, either she's getting information or grabbing. We can get accurate numbers and have it to you by Friday, but I do know just facilities-wise, that at Sumner, when they're accessing, anytime that the practice location is not on campus, but it is within walking distance, my understanding is that may be happening. But and I don't know if the bus was continued in after Dr. Faust left, because honestly, this is the first time I've heard about it, but we can get an accurate account, and we can have Ms. Romstead to survey the schools. I'm not sure if she just walked in. I don't know if she has it tonight, but we can get it to you by Friday. We can have her to survey the athletic directors and the coaches. I can't hear it. I can't read lips. I can't see it. Sorry about that.
But it was very faint.
I sent Steve a list of teams that walk or drive and their practice schedules, so if you need that, I can forward that on to whoever, so you can
If
kind
you
of
forward
look.
it to me, I can give it to them. Thank you.
Are we able to ask Ms. Romstead a question?
Yes, Ms. Romstead.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
I want to make sure the board's not solving for something that's not an issue. So, I know the question is out there, and you're going to get us answers back to that. But from your, I'm just, as we are looking at our students, I want to make sure we're stopping for the right thing. I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm not asking you to make a decision. I want to be 100% clear with that. I just want to make sure we're solving for the right thing, and it's sports the right thing.
Sure. I think Dr. Stubblefield was very right on when our coaches want our kids to ride together on a competition, and if parents want to take them after the competition, that's fine.
Okay.
With regards to practices, we have some schools that are practicing off-site, and sometimes the site they're practicing at is closer to home. So when it comes to having to come back to school and then change and then go back home, they're losing practice time. They're losing homework time. They're losing some of that other stuff. So there's the bowling teams that compete at KC Bowl. Some of them are closer in location than by the time they wait for a bus to get them back, to get on the late bus, to get them home. So there are teams and programs for practice, but I sure would not want to see them. I want to see them driving together. I think most coaches would, and I can survey them, but I think pretty strongly they want that team united piece. And
that's normally
everybody's there. They have their shoes.
Yep.
They have their uniform. You're all good.
And that's normally the nature of a sport. So thank you. Like I said, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I just have seen people try to solve for things that don't even need to be solved for. So thank you.
But can we make sure we check? I'm not trying to give anybody any more work.
No, I have it here for the practices,
Okay,
and
because
I'll forward
I
it.
didn't know until I saw the little girls at the grocery store and said, hey, can you help us? And we didn't know. So I'm just saying, can we ask, can we see?
I have it, I'll forward it to you now.
Okay.
Yep.
And Ms. Romstead, I don't have a question for you, but I think as you are in this work day in out, I think my statement around it not being for athletes, if you know that there are opportunities or things outside of the academic that you think our kids, if they had access to, please relay that. I won't put you on the spot now. To Dr. Stubblefield, I know for me it came from an intern curriculum. This is what you're doing in the school day. This is how it enriches. I do recognize that athletic opportunities also come across. And so I don't want to create a barrier. I also don't want to open up your email inbox to be like, can the kids go to this? And it's always a field trip. And so just sending that as well. So,
Okay.
but thank you.
Mr. Lopez, I make a motion that we accept the second read with possible changes, policy JGG.
I think, if you could clarify the motion just a little bit for the record, so we're clean on it. I think the two changes that I heard tonight were that we would want a limitation on mileage for students to transport themselves of no greater than 30 miles, and that no other students would be permitted to ride with another student to an event. Those are the two I heard. Was there a third?
Just based off of what we've heard tonight, though, does there need to be a definer of academic versus sports? Because if we're saying, I
didn't hear a consensus on that, but if there is one, that's up to the board.
okay, are we splitting hairs at this point? So do our coaches then have the freedom to be able to say, no, I want my team to ride together, although the policy says one thing?
The policy allows the parent to give permission to allow the student to drive themselves to or from, but the sponsor of the activity or the event would still have the right to say, no, we're all riding as a team
Okay.
to the event, or we're all riding as,
Team to practice.
yeah, that would
Okay.
still be left to the coach or the sponsor of the activity to decide those specific issues.
Okay.
What this is doing is allowing, right now, the way it would be crafted, it's allowing the parents to sign a release, and if they sign that release, their son or daughter would be able to transport themselves to events, or the coach is allowing that, or the sponsor is allowing that to happen.
Okay. Thank you.
So, that good for the motion?
So we have a motion. Is that okay with your motion, what Mr. Goheen?
No,
No?
I'll let someone else do it.
Okay. So you want to rescind your motion, Ms. Drew?
Yes, I rescind my motion.
Okay.
So remind me, sorry, two things we're adding are not to exceed 30 miles and
No other student in the vehicle.
no other student. So what we see on here, plus not to exceed 30 miles and no other students in the vehicle.
Right, and if that passes, I'll bring language back on the third read with that, those two modifications.
So approving as written at this point, and the third read will have the corrections?
That's correct.
Okay. I, Rachel, make the motion that we move that we accept policy JGG with the addition that students are not allowed to transport other students, as well as not to exceed, students may not drive further than 30 miles.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Further clarification, discussion, questions? Ms. Humphries?
So when it comes back to us with the third read, you will have a form for us to see for that the parents would be signing.
We can have a form for you guys to review as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I have a question, just for clarification on the first two sentences. School-provided transportation shall be available, provided is deleted, and then transportation may be provided,
Yeah,
not shall be provided.
and that's the KSB proposed changes to the policy, so if that's ultimately not something the board wants to make, then that would be
And
something.
that's what I want clarification from the board. Does this, or for your interpretation, does this say that we are not discussed before we move to a third read?
Can you restate the sentence as you would read it? Because on the fourth word, I see shall.
But it shall be available, provided is strike through. And then the second sentence says transportation may be provided, not shall be provided.
So my interpretation, even based off of the conversation we're having today, is if all 5 students are driving, I would not, just because I'm the sponsor or the coach, I would not have to rent a district vehicle to drive no one. That's how I'm interpreting it based off of our current. I
That's
think
for the
every,
participants, that's for the athletes. But is there a bus that normally goes to the game? I don't know. If there's a bus that normally goes to the game, the way that this reads, and correct me if I'm wrong, it is not guaranteed to drive to the game. It doesn't say it shall, it's just saying it may be, it says shall be available, but it may be board. Are we saying that it just may be available or may not be available? It goes to the question that Janie mentioned about those who don't have vehicles.
the limitation, sorry. The limitation that I cannot drive other students and that,
Are not related to these two sentences.
but if I can't, I don't believe that a 52-player football team, there are 52 vehicles outside for each individual player. So one would make the assumption that there's going to be at least out of a 52, if we're talking about a game, out of those 52 players, 10 of them are probably going to need a ride. So that sponsor is probably going to have that. However, when we get into the smaller quantities, I think that's where I see the question that you're asking. But if it's related to a game, I see it differently.
You know what, I'm not putting a stipulation whether it's a game, whether it's a debate, whether it's or anything. The way it's written, it allows us not to provide transportation. And that's what I'm just asking, is that what I don't believe we want to have the language to say that we'll think about. But when we say we're going to a third read, we need to make sure we are reading everything. And you can correct if I'm reading more into it, Mr. Goheen.
No, if the board wants transportation to be shall provided to events or to school, then you need to have it say that. Right now, as it's written, transportation, if you look at the second sentence, is a may for events. And I think you could change the shall in the first sentence, leave the shall. I think the intent behind the change for that first sentence was to take the word bus out so you could use a van or a Suburban or something for the transportation, but.
Well, yeah, you deleted bus. We get that.
Right.
And I was just going to say, the transportation may be provided by the district for all school activities. I think it goes back to, we offer opportunities for students, but if the transportation is not available, for example, when Ms. Russell was referring to, there was an opportunity to go to KU Med Center, we didn't have buses available, so those students, so I think that's, when I read it, that's where the may, but I completely understand.
Shall be available to and from school. Shall be available, not shall be provided. Provided as a strike-through.
I was referring to the second one, so I understand what you're saying with the first one, but to and from schools, for those who qualify, we do provide it.
But that sentence does not say.
So I'm happy to, if Yolanda is fine, I'm happy to reinsert the word provided. I think we have guidelines that say, it says for who qualifies, so I don't think available or provided, those words can be used interchangeably, and I'm happy to move forward. I will also say, Greg, at the end, my motion said that it would include, but if I look at the last paragraph, it speaks specifically to when, I don't know if there was anything I needed to strike out of there when I made the addition.
No, I don't think there was anything you needed to strike. I think those are both adds.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Clark, Ms. Russell, are you amending your motion to include provided
And versus available.
versus available? Thank you. Ms. Clark, are you okay with that amendment to the motion?
I am.
Okay, thank you.
Brownlee Page, yes.
Rachel Russell,
Rachel Russell, yes.
Dr. Nguyen.
I'm voting no because I don't agree with the last part of the student driving.
Motion carries. Thank you, Board.
Okay, we will bring back those revised changes for the third read on that one. Next policy is DFAB. This is the one that deals with the grants and the financial requirements for that. There were no changes, and would ask for that one to be approved as a second read.
Rachel, move that we accept for second read changes to policy DFAB.
I second it.
Moved and seconded. Questions? Ms. Smith, roll call.
Londa Clark,
Yolanda Clark, yes.
Maxine Drew,
Maxine Drew, yes.
Janie Humphries,
Janie, yes.
Randy Lopez,
Randy Lopez, yes.
Wanda Brownlee Page,
Wanda Brownlee Page, yes.
Rachel Russell,
Rachel Russell, yes.
Dr. Nguyen.
Win, yes.
Thank you.
Motion carries. Thank you.
So the next policy that we had, that there was some significant discussion by the board on, was policy IF, which is the policy dealing with challenges to media materials and text or instructional materials. The primary discussion is centered around the composition of the review committee, and we've got some thoughts on potential language changes there, but again, this is something that I do need the board to weigh in and give explicit instruction on what you want for the third read on this. There's one other suggestion made by staff, and that is on the section that's right under where it says collection development. That sentence reads, the media collection shall be developed systematically, be well balanced in coverage of subjects, and include various types of materials and diverse. The suggestion was to add the word "and inclusive content in multiple formats." So the additional language there would be to add the words "and inclusive," with the thought that that means something slightly different than the word diverse. And so that's a change we would propose having the board approve as part of the second read, although it's not in the draft that you have in front of you. That was a suggestion that came forward from administration. As far as it relates to the composition of the review committee, following up from some of the comments made by the board at the last meeting, the suggestion is to modify that language to continue to include as the committee a building principal, the executive director of curriculum and instruction, and then add some language that would allow there to be some additional, it would still include subject matter specialists, which would include either teachers or librarians as appropriate, given whatever the materials at issue are. But then wanted to include a student, for example, in a particular situation that could happen, or the superintendent could include a student if it was at the high school level, and maybe not have to do that at the grade school level, or if it was deemed to be a situation where it wasn't appropriate to have a student on the committee, that could be decided on a case-by-case basis. Same thing with other types of individuals who are not part of the sort of academic process, looking at the materials, or the specialists looking at the materials. Want to include a community member or something like that, that could be included in that catch-all. That was one suggestion for the language change. Again, didn't have clear, concise guidance from the board as to whether you wanted a student or some member of the community to be part of that review committee or not. I know that some board members indicated they thought that maybe should stay in, and others were silent on it. So before I made changes, I wanted to have some direction from the board. And then the rest of the language stays as is. I didn't get any further proposed changes from board members. So if there are other sections that board wants to discuss and say, hey, I don't want this to be part of it or not, then we need to know that.
So I'll just add notes to want to be inclusive of community members or students, or if there's pushback one way or another.
Instead of adding the word "and," because the argument that I heard was that we didn't want it to hold up the actual process of them getting the committee if they couldn't identify a student or a community member. Could, after the word but before the superintendent, could it say students and community members are like, not recommended, but like
Highly encouraged.
highly encouraged to play a role, however, not required?
Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
can put whatever language the board wants to try to put together there. So,
That would suffice my concern around just completely saying nowhere in this document not against the recommendation, but different than the recommendation. Thus, if that is good, I will make the motion that we approve as the second read changes to policy IF with the added language around inclusion. I was just looking at you like, oh, he's looking at the yellow. Okay.
I was looking at the yellow just to make sure, but yeah.
All right, there's a motion. Is there a second?
I second it.
Ms. Drew seconds. Thank you. Any further questions, discussion?
No, that took care of my concerns last time, so thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Smith, roll call.
Yolanda Clark,
Yolanda Clark, yes.
Maxine Drew,
Maxine Drew, yes.
Janie Humphries,
Janie, yes.
Randy Lopez,
Randy Lopez, yes.
Wanda Brownlee Page,
Wanda Brownlee Page, yes.
Rachel Russell,
Rachel Russell, yes.
Dr. Nguyen.
Win, yes.
Thank you.
Motion carries. Thank you.
All right, so the last policy that we have up is the policy JH, which is the eligibility for participation in student activities and primarily athletics. Again, the proposal from the administration is to make this so that if you're eligible under KCSA, you're eligible within this district to participate in those activities, which is the same as it was during the COVID time period, but it would be removing the additional requirements for eligibility that the district had for participation prior to that time.
So moved that we accept for a second read changes to policy JH.
The athletic
Yeah,
eligibility?
because, or maybe I'm reading it wrong. I thought the principals will follow KCSA, but it seems like they're also giving them some room to add some things.
It does.
And I'm just saying, why can't there be some continuity? And all the schools, all the principals get together and come up with something that it doesn't vary from school to school. If I transfer, at least I know the rules are the same.
Ms. Page, I think that's a much larger conversation, because I know we've had that conversations about how hard that is. So does it really fall in this one policy, or is it a larger conversation across our schools?
Well, I mean, if the principals, I just think they need the continuity to be able to go from one school, the principals can't get together and agree on something.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, I don't know. So that was the previous policy, so the board can, I would recommend that all school-sponsored activities shall, I mean, I think you, and Greg, I can be wrong because I'm looking at it on the fly, take out the principal shall be responsible for organizing and improving all, if you strike that and put
I'm
another
happy to
general.
make the friendly amendment to
Yeah,
strike beginning at the word the.
Or we can,
It's actually the paragraph under KCSA eligibility where it says the principal of an individual high school in USD 500 may prescribe eligibility requirements in addition to those required by KCSA. And the board,
But it does state that it would be
It has to
subject
be
to approval of the superintendent, and it shall be uniformly applied within the school. So not, okay.
I think that's what Ms. Page.
Yeah, okay.
yeah, and I don't have an issue with striking that, and then whatever we're doing, we're following KCSA or it is district policy. But I think to Ms. Clark's point, there are some other areas where it gives principals, so we can look at those in the future as well.
So what I'm hearing is perhaps try to make a modification so it's uniform at each level within the district, because obviously there could be differences between the middle schools and the high schools, I assume. Right?
Yeah, because they got different sports.
Right.
Some are the same, and some are different.
Okay.
You okay with that friendly amendment to add some language to,
I think I got completely confused because this said high schools and then we started talking about middle schools.
Well, all I was saying is that the way it currently reads, it gives the building principals some discretion to depart from what would otherwise be district-wide rules. And so I think what I'm hearing Ms. Page say, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that she believes that it should be uniform across the district at each level of competition.
So any KCSA recognized sport, they are just.
I second it.
okay, thank you. Ms. Humphries?
I'd like some clarification. Our old policy required the student to have a 2.0, correct, Greg?
I believe that's correct.
And that is more than what KCSA requires.
That is correct.
So can a student be flunking a class and still qualify for KCSA rules? Ms. Romstad would know that.
I can answer it. They have to be passing 5 classes, so technically, yes, they could have an F. And I don't have it in my, they can, but you said with no grades of an F. But yes, they could. They have to pass 5 classes.
That's been 5 classes out of 7, so they could be
Or
flunking 2 classes.
whatever. We have,
But that would be for the season that they're actively playing in.
no, so like if somebody last spring did not meet the KCSA requirement, they won't be able to play anything until January, till second semester. It's each semester, so, yeah, I hope that answers your questions. So it depends on when the sport falls. So like a sport like basketball, you can start out ineligible, bring your grades up and be eligible second semester. Fall sports,
2.0 and not, so that's a big change for our district, that we're going back to the CASA requirements, not what we were holding our athletes to.
and I think what we discovered and discussed, that we actually were penalizing our students because when we surveyed and looked at other districts, they are allowing their students to participate based off CASA eligibility. So while our students were already disadvantaged in so many ways, we were creating another barrier in addition to the other challenges. And that's where, when I came in historically, that's where it came from. And I personally don't disagree, but I know I don't have a vote.
I just wanted to clarify that is a big change that we are making, going back to the statewide requirements.
Thank you, Ms. Humphries. Other questions? Okay. If not, Ms. Smith, roll call, please.
Ms. Russell, I need you to repeat the motion, please.
Yeah, so the motion is that we accept for second read, policy JH with the
To eliminate the discretion of the principal to modify the requirements. That would take care of it throughout the policy.
Okay, got it. Okay, so we are omitting the
Discretion of the principal to modify the eligibility
discretion of the principal to modify the requirements.
Yeah.
Yep, that was it.
Second.
That was it. And seconded. Thank you. We got it. Ms. Smith, roll call, please.
To modify the requirements. You're stopping.
Modify the, yes.
Yolanda Clark,
Yolanda Clark, yes.
Maxine Drew,
Maxine Drew, yes.
Janie Humphries,
Janie Humphries, yes.
Randy Lopez,
Randy Lopez, yes.
Wanda Brownlee Page,
Wanda Brownlee Page, yes.
Rachel Russell,
Rachel Russell, yes.
Dr. Nguyen. Thank you.
Motion carries. Thank you. So we are at executive session if you want to release staff.
So we are at executive session. For the first one, those who will be present are Officer Sy, Dr. Campbell, Mr. Lilly, Ms. Devon, and Dr. Irvin.
For the purpose of discussing matters relating to security measures, which if discussed in open session would jeopardize such security measures, going in at 7:16 for 20 minutes.
Oh, that gives you.
I need a motion, yeah.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Ms. Smith, roll call.
Yolanda Clark,
Yolanda Clark, yes.
Maxine Drew,
Maxine Drew, yes.
Janie Humphries,
Janie, yes.
Randy Lopez,
Randy, yes.
Wanda Brownlee Page,
Wanda Brownlee Page, yes.
Rachel Russell,
Rachel Russell, yes.
Dr. Nguyen.
Thank you. Motion to return to open session, please.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Smith?
Yolanda Clark,
Yolanda Clark, yes.
Randy Lopez,
Randy Lopez, yes.
Rachel Russell,
Rachel Russell. Yes.
Dr. Nguyen. Thank you.
Thank you. Motion to extend executive session for 10 minutes, going in at 7:40, coming out at 7:50.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Smith?
Yolanda Clark,
Yolanda Clark, yes.
Randy Lopez,
Randy Lopez, yes.
Rachel Russell,
Rachel Russell, yes.
Dr. Nguyen. Thank you.
Thank you. Motion to return to open session, please.
So move.
Second.
Ms. Smith?
Yolanda Clark,
Yolanda Clark, yes.
Maxine Drew,
Maxine Drew, yes.
Janie Humphries,
Janie, yes.
Randy Lopez,
Randy, yes.
Wanda Brownlee Page,
Wanda Brownlee Page, yes.
Rachel Russell,
Rachel Russell, yes.
Dr. Nguyen. Thank you.
Thank you. We're back in open session. Would now entertain a motion to recess to executive session to discuss matters of non-elected personnel in order to protect the privacy interests of those parties involved, going in at 7:55 for 10 minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Smith?
Yolanda Clark,
Yolanda Clark, yes.
Maxine Drew,
Maxine Drew, yes.
Janie Humphries,
Janie, yes.
Randy Lopez,
Randy, yes.
Wanda Brownlee Page,
Wanda Brownlee Page, yes.
Rachel Russell,
Rachel Russell, yes.
Dr. Nguyen. Thank you.
Thank you. Motion to return to open session, please.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Smith?
Yolanda Clark,
Yolanda Clark, yes.
Maxine Drew,
Maxine Drew, yes.
Randy Lopez,
Randy Lopez, yes.
Rachel Russell.
Rachel Russell, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. To go into executive session to discuss matters of non-elected personnel, going in at 8:15 for 15 minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Ms. Smith?
Yolanda Clark,
Yolanda Clark, yes.
Maxine Drew,
Maxine Drew, yes.
Randy Lopez,
Randy Lopez, yes.
Rachel Russell.
Rachel Russell, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. open session, please?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Smith, roll call.
Yolanda Clark,
Yolanda Clark, yes.
Maxine Drew,
Maxine Drew, yes.
Janie Humphries,
Jeannie, yes.
Randy Lopez.
Randy, yes.
Thank you.
Motion to recess to executive session to discuss matters of non-elected personnel, going in at 8:34 for 15 minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Smith?
Yolanda Clark,
Yolanda Clark, yes.
Maxine Drew,
Maxine Drew, yes.
Janie Humphries,
Jeannie, yes.
Randy Lopez.
Randy, yes.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. moved and seconded by Ms. Clark. Ms. Smith?
Yolanda Clark,
Yolanda Clark, yes.
Janie Humphries,
Janie, yes.
Randy Lopez,
Randy, yes.
Rachel Russell.
Rachel Russell, yes.
Thank you.
Back in open session. Motion to extend executive session for 20 minutes, please.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Smith?
Yolanda Clark,
Yolanda Clark, yes.
Janie Humphries,
Janie, yes.
Randy Lopez,
Randy, yes.
Rachel Russell.
Rachel Russell, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Motion to return to open session.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Smith.
Londa Clark, Maxine Drew,
Maxine Drew, yes.
Janie Humphries,
Janie, yes.
Randy Lopez.
Randy, yes?
Rachel Russell.
Rachel Russell, yes.
Thank you. We're back in open session. Board, please make sure you look at your email for a potential response regarding August 31st from Ms. Smith. Please make sure you respond to her in the next day or so we can figure a few things out. We do have a special board meeting, board development with Marcia on September 7th. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you so much.